Please report.
Kenville.
Mr. Smith, Mr. Hamilton. It was late in the evening, in the early part of June 2009, outside of a modest house. We're standing outside of a modest house in Sac City, Iowa. It's a small town, not too terribly far from here. It's only about 2,400 people in Sac City. This modest house looks like many that you'll see in rural Iowa. And if we could go inside that house that evening, what we would see is two men. One of them is John David Green, right here. John is a father of 4, a grandfather of 13. He's up in Iowa visiting his friend. That's why he's in Sac City. And that's who the other person is in this house. The other person is Mark Coster. What we would see if we were standing there is that John is at the computer. Their evening routine was that they would listen to the ball game, listen to TV shows over the internet, sort of stream those things over the internet. But on this particular night, Mark Coster is agitated. He is upset at life, upset at his father for a perceived wrong. And he's upset at John Green for the way that he cooked the chicken that day. And it's at this moment that Mark Coster attacks John Green with a baseball bat. Now, to understand this situation, to understand how we got here and what happened, we have to go back nearly 30 years. Go back to Texas, where Mark Coster and John Green met. They worked together at a mobile gas station in Texas. They were co-workers at first, and then eventually John Green became Mark's manager. John Green managed the store. Mark was one of his cashiers at the gas station. By all accounts, John will tell you, Mark was a good cashier. One of the things about Mark Coster that you're going to hear through the evidence is that he was a smart guy. He was good with numbers. He had a good degree of intelligence. What you're also going to hear is that he had some mental problems. Back in Texas, how that would manifest itself was that he was very defensive about doing his job and the way that he did his job. And John Green, as his manager, he'll tell you, he let him do his job. He was good. His till always came out right. But if you tried to tell him, hey, you got to put the bills a certain way, you got to do this, he'd get very defensive about it. They did live together in Texas, under the same roof for a little bit, and then after that, Mark Coster rented a trailer on a piece of land that John Green had. John and his wife lived in one trailer, and Mark Coster lived in another. And he was down there. They were together for about 2.5 years. They weren't, I don't call them best buddies or anything. They're good friends. They share, similar interests: sports, fishing. They're both interested in computers at the time, and this is 30 years ago. It's sort of new cutting-edge technology. At some point, John moves back to Florida, and a few years later, gets a knock on the door, and it's Mark Coster looking for a job, unannounced. John had not invited him there, but Mark showed up. John did offer him a job. He was running a different type of gas station then. So a similar situation. Mark works for him. A few years go by. Mark goes off to, they go their separate ways. John goes off to Oregon. Mark, I think, ends up in Arkansas. And they lose track of each other for about 10 years. And they reconnect eventually just over email. And there's sort of a standing offer for John to come up sometime to Iowa and visit Mark. And eventually he takes him up on that. It's around June of 2009, or excuse me, around early springtime of 2009. He does come up to Iowa for a visit. And John's going to tell you the reason that he came up is he was stressed out. He had some things going on in his personal life. His wife had been diagnosed with cancer. Their marriage was not going well, and he wanted to just get away. So he came up here to Iowa for, ended up being a couple of months. And he's going to tell you, and you'll hear in the interview that he did with the police officer, that when he gets up here, Mark is down on life. Mark is angry at the world. He's paranoid. He's got some problems. It doesn't get in the way of their friendship. This is his friend. But clearly there's something not right with Mark. What you're going to hear from the other evidence in the case is consistent with that. You'll hear from Mark's neighbor, Sandy Kenville, that she could tell something wasn't right around that time in 2009, around April, May, June of 2009. She thought Mark had AIDS or cancer. He was not looking very well, wasn't taking very good care of himself, and appeared to be ill. What she's also going to tell you is that that's why she thought John Green was in town. She thought that he was his caretaker, that he was there to help out around the house, and that's by all accounts what was happening. John was helping with groceries. They appeared to be, by all accounts, good friends. There was no problems, any hints of problems between the two of them. Everything had been fine as far as the neighbor could tell. What the neighbor didn't know, and what John Green actually didn't know, even though he knew that Mark wasn't in perfect mental health, was that Mark had actually been diagnosed by a doctor in 1990 with chronic paranoid schizophrenia. And this is a serious mental health issue. It's a serious disease. It's a disease that doesn't get cured. There is no cure for schizophrenia. It can be treated through medication and other therapies you're going to hear. And people can function if they're getting treatment. But if they're not getting treatment, they're going to be susceptible to going into these psychotic breaks. And by all accounts, Mark was not getting any treatment, and his mental state was deteriorating in June of 2009. And you're going to see the records from Cherokee Mental Health Institute that talk about Mark's diagnosis. And the reason that that's relevant, and the reason that I'm talking about it, is that is a large part of how we got here. When Mark Koster attacks John Green with that baseball bat, you're going to see that that is the result of a psychotic break that he's had. And in those medical reports from 1990, granted that is a while ago, but it exemplifies what can happen to someone who has untreated paranoid schizophrenia. And you're going to be instructed on the law of self-defense. One of the things that you're able to consider in self-defense is who the first aggressor is. And in those medical reports, you're going to see that Mark Koster assaulted a 7-year-old neighbor. The boy had been trespassing on his property, and Mark took it up. He went up and slapped him and assaulted him. That's what led to the commitment. So when you look at what happened here, you've got 30 more years, well, 20, I guess it'd be, again, not good at that, 20 some odd years, untreated. A serious, debilitating mental health condition that he has refused treatment for. And so what's the other evidence that supports this? Well, about a year before this all happened, Mark Koster cut off ties with his family. He did not go to the family functions anymore. Would not have anything to do with any of his siblings or his family. And that's consistent with what you will hear from John Green, is that he was mad at the world. He had been wronged, and that was a problem. So on that evening, the evidence is going to show you what happened. And John Green is going to tell you what happened. He was attacked. Now, when we talk about justification, you're going to get instructed by the judge at the end of the case what the law is. And certainly, ideas like a proportional response and things like that are appropriate. But this is a situation where John Green was attacked with a weapon. And he did not, Mr. Smith said in his opening, the evidence is going to be that, I think he made it sound like he's a caveman, raising the bat above his head, knocking him down to the floor, and then while John Green is helplessly on the floor, he jumps on top of him and crushes the life out of him, is what he said. That's not what the evidence will show. Okay, the evidence is going to show that this was a struggle between the two of them, that no one ever really gained, John Green at times had more control of that bat maybe, and was able to use it to strike at Mark Coster at one point. But they fell into a table, they broke a table that was in the living room there. They struggled around on the ground, and that's when Mark did end up on the bottom, and John Green was on top, and he had the upper hand, but Mark wasn't stopping his fight. He was not relenting in any manner. And had John Green got up, you're going to see that he would have been attacked again. So these are all things that you're going to hear in the evidence, and you're going to have to keep an open mind. I understand that you're going to hear some evidence that John Green made some mistakes after this all happened. He was in shock at the fact that his lifelong friend had attacked him. He's in a town where he knows literally no one. He is, he has decided that it is easier for him, the stress of having to report this to the police. Are they going to believe me? This is a small town. Mark's got all these siblings. Will they believe me that I was attacked? He knows, that he's in a house where no one has visited over the 2 months that he's been there. Mark is a hermit. It is the easiest choice in front of him. Unfortunately, he chooses that path of least resistance. Rather than call the police, involve the authorities, he puts them in the basement. And, when they say actions speak louder than words, those actions are the actions of someone who is scared and who wants to just leave, who doesn't want to deal with this situation. But it's not that he has committed a crime, okay? Now, when the police show up, he's still in this flight mode. So yes, he initially does tell them, no, I've never been to I wasn't at Mark's house. You're going to hear the prosecutors and the police are going to try to spin this as somehow the police used this investigative technique to get John to admit that he murdered Mark Costa. And that is a bunch of hogwash. And you're going to see that in the end. They don't prop up Mark's schizophrenia. Because A, there's nothing to prop up. It's real. It existed. It was a serious condition. But you're also going to see that they didn't bring it up. John Green was the first person to bring up Mark's mental health issues. He may have not done it in the most politically correct of ways. When he's talking about this with the detective, he says, he wasn't right up in the head. And he calls him crazy. And those may not be politically correct, but those are the best ways that John Green knows how to describe it. That's not the officers coming up with that. That's John Green. That's his statements. They don't invent this idea that Mark's crazy. The other thing about it is, I want you to pay special attention to that interview and what they say in that interview. Okay? Because they're going to try to come in here and say, well, we suggested that Mark attacked him. They say that one time. Did he come at you? They don't say, did he have a bat? Did you choke him? Did you strangle him with a bat? They say he didn't come at you. There are 11 or 12 other times where the investigator is saying, hey, this was an accident, right? You didn't mean to do this. This was an accident. You made a mistake. This is an accident. You know, if they're trying to plant some seeds in John Green's mind in that interview, it's that it was an accident or a mistake. Self-defense isn't an accident, folks. John Green fought for his life, and he's not sorry about that. If he had to do it again, he'd do it again, because it was him or Mark Coster. The medical evidence, you know, you're going to hear from the medical examiner in this case, entirely consistent with what John Green said, that this baseball bat was used to strangle. And the prosecutor said, well, there's no motive. We may never know the motive. It's because they don't want to accept the truth. The truth is that this was self-defense. And you look at the facts in this case, when you hear them coming, there is no motive. They're good friends. They're getting along. They are pals, essentially. There's no animosity between them. Nobody slept with the other person's wife. There's no financial gain to be had. There's Mark's bank accounts go untouched. Mark was, you'll hear, a very frugal person. He would get by on very little income throughout the year. So there is no motive. The reason that they stand there in opening statements say, we may never know the motive. And when they say an unknown motive, it's because they don't want to accept the truth. They don't want to accept the evidence for what it is. And Dr. Thompson, you know, he's going to tell you that if you strangled somebody with your hands, it would leave certain damage to other parts of the neck. And the only thing that's damaged in really in Mark Coster's throat is this hyoid in the front of the hyoid bone that's in the front of the neck. And they're going to make a big deal of this 2 minutes idea. They're essentially pulling that out of thin air. They get it from John Green. That's what he tells the investigators. But you're also going to hear him say, I don't know how long it was. It seemed like an eternity. This was such a surprising event. You can understand, you'll be able to understand, when you hear him testify, when you hear his interview, that he's not going to be looking at a stopwatch. Nobody's doing it. Nobody's keeping track of it. And Dr. Thompson is going to tell you that this death could have been very quick. It could have been instantaneous or within a few seconds that he passed away. And that's because of a concept called sudden cardiac arrest. That when that hyoid bone gets broke, or when an object is pressed against your throat, you can die very, very quickly. Okay? So was there a struggle? Did Mark continue to struggle? Yes. But the idea that this was 2 minutes of them laying on the ground, that's a fiction. There is no proof of that. When they asked John Green that, he's doing his best under the circumstances to recall this event, but it is not set in stone. There's no way to medically prove that, or any other way to prove that. So what I need you to do in this case is keep an open mind. Listen to the evidence as it comes in. And I think that when you do that, you're going to see that John Green didn't have a choice that night. He had to defend himself. That he did so lawfully, and he was justified. I'll ask you to return a verdict of not guilty at the close of the evidence in this case. Appreciate your time.